A few weeks ago, I unboxed this monitor, and in the comments, Amelia asked a really good question. How does media actually look on it? And is it any good for productivity and general day-to-day work, not just gaming? So for Amelia and everyone else who've asked, this is for you. 27 inches, 4K, 160 Hz, and it can also drop down to 1080p to hit 320 Hz, so a dual gaming option available. At launch, it was selling for £329, and it is now selling between £270 to £290 depending on where you're looking. 1 millisecond grey to grey, half a millisecond with smart monitor blur reduction, 10-bit color, 90% DCI P3 and 130% sRGB, factory calibration to Delta E, so under 2, VESA display HDR 400 certified, 350 nits standard, 450 nits peak, 2 HDMI 2.1 ports, DisplayPort 1.4, a USB-C with 65 watts of power delivery, and a USB hub and KVM switch available. This is a lot of monitor for under £300, so now let's find out whether it delivers. So moving on to the three consoles that I've been testing and using. So PS5 first, into the HDMI 1. Both HDMI ports here are 2.1. That bandwidth is the whole story on a console monitor. It is what lets you run 4K at a higher refresh rate and HDR all at the same time. On a HDMI 2.0 port, you would be choosing between them. Variable refresh rate works through Evnia's adaptive sync technology, so when a game dips below its target, you get no tearing or no judder. Combined with the 1 millisecond grey to grey response time, motion stays clean. So I checked out Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced in HDR is where the color spec earns its keep here. Ray traced global illumination runs in every graphics mode, so you get sunlight bouncing off the water and properly dark ship interiors in the same frame. 95% DCI P3 and 10-bit color handles those Caribbean turquoises and sunset oranges without banding, and because the panel is factory calibrated to Delta E under 2, you're seeing roughly what's Ubisoft graded rather than an oversaturated approximation. And here is something key to this monitor. Black Flag has 3 graphic modes: performance at 60 frames, fidelity at 30 and balanced at 40. Balanced is only available if your display supports 120 Hz. On a 60 Hz monitor, that mode is grayed out. Worth being precise though, all 3 modes upscale to 4K rather than rendering it natively. So this is not a pure native 4K showcase. So moving on to my Xbox Series X into HDMI 2, same 2.1 bandwidth, same 4K 120 Hz supported, same adaptive sync technology, but Xbox has 2 things PlayStation does not. First, Auto HDR. Xbox retrofits HDR onto older games that never shipped with it. On a display HDR 400 panel with 450 nits of peak brightness, the effect is real rather than cosmetic. Games from years ago suddenly have lifted highlights. Secondly, Dolby Vision for gaming. Xbox is the only console offering it. So this Evnia is not Dolby Vision certified, so you're getting HDR10 handling that rather than the full standard, but in titles like Forza Horizon 6, the image is noticeably richer. One spec worth knowing, this panel runs to 160 Hz, but consoles you're capped 120 Hz for the moment. That extra headroom only matters if you also connect a PC, and is a genuine reason to consider this over 120 Hz console only monitor. Moving on to the Nintendo Switch 2, and this is where it gets interesting. So it has to be docked, and the Switch 2 outputs up to 4K but is capped at 60 frames per second at that resolution with HDR10 supported. A lot of that 4K is upscaled rather than native, and on this panel upscaling holds up well because it has 163 pixels per inch, and at 27 inches is dense enough to be forgiving. Mario Kart World at 4K is generally gorgeous here. Bright, saturated, exactly what Nintendo intended, and the wide color gamut has plenty of headroom for it. Now, honest limitation, and it's not the monitor's fault. The Switch 2 supports variable refresh rate, but only in handheld mode. So if your game dips below its target, you will see it, where on the PS5 and the Xbox, using the Evnia's adaptive sync would have smoothed it out. For mostly Nintendo player, no problem at all. The image quality is superb. A quick console summary. So 2 HDMI 2.1 ports means 2 consoles stay permanently connected, and you switch inputs from your joystick control on the back. At this price point, it's one of the strongest console monitors propositions going. So one part of Amelia's question was around media. So I've run Netflix, YouTube in 4K HDR, Disney Plus through the PS5 app, and all three look excellent. The specs explain why. The 178-degree viewing angle means color holds up if you're not sat directly in the center. With a peak 450 nits handles HDR highlights properly. The honest caveat is contrast. This is an IPS, so 1000 to 1 rather than effectively infinite contrast on an OLED panel. In a dark room, you will see IPS black levels for what they are. In a normally lit room, it's more than good enough. And 4K content on a 27-inch panel at 163 pixels per inch is sharper than the same content on a bigger TV. And with the ambi glow running behind it, the room becomes part of the film. That one is not a spec. It's just lovely to see, and it's a great experience. And it naturally just sets to follow your screen. You can change that on the on-screen settings if you wish. So moving on to accessibility and what you won't get with other reviewers. So I'm registered blind. First up is the low blue mode, reduces the high energy blue light in the 415 to 450 nanometer range, which is the band associated with eye fatigue. Then we move on to flicker free, which eliminates PWM dimming, this invisible flicker that gives a lot of people headaches over long sessions without them even knowing about it. So another great feature that I use all the time, especially for productivity and reading heavy documents, is easy read, optimize sharpness and contrast for text. All three are one click from the joystick's quick menu. Then we move on to color control. Is generally deep for this price. Color temperatures from 5000 to 11500 Kelvin, individual red, green and blue gain sliders, and gamma presets from 1.8 to 2.6. Then you've got a stark shadow boost, so it lifts shadows details without blowing out on highlights. So dark scenes are harder to see with low vision, and this gives me more visual information to work with. And that's marketed as a competitive gaming feature as well, so it allows you to delve in and support your gaming. Then the one that matters the most, 4K at 163 pixels per inch paired with Windows scaling at 150 or 175% gives you large text that stays generally crisp. And this is the same for the Mac as well. It's working really well on Mac. Scale up a 1080p monitor and everything goes soft. Scale up this one and it stays sharp. And then the stand, we've got 130 millimeters of height adjustment, 90 degrees of swivel each way, -5 to +20 degrees of tilt, plus a full 90-degree pivot into portrait mode. It is VESA mountable too, so if your stand doesn't suit you, you could get an arm or a monitor rest if you wish to make it a more accessible seating position, or just change your office setup. An honest limitation, it may be for other people, but for myself, a joystick control on the back is handy. It's better than buttons under the front bezel of your monitor. However, this can be a little bit fiddly for some people to find. But Philips' answer to this is the Evnia Precision Center software, which puts every one of those controls on your PC screen. But I would really love to see a monitor ship with on-screen menu display that narrates one day. Nobody is doing it yet, so come on Philips, let's get it sorted. Amelia's second question, is it any good for work? Yes, and the connectivity spec is why. So we've got Word and Excel at 4K with scaling up to 150%. Text is large, crisp and comfortable for a full working day. And that 95% DCI P3 Camit with Delta E under 2 accuracy means color-coded spreadsheets, brand assets and the image work show accurate colors, which most monitors at this price cannot promise. Then we move on to our USB-C with 65 watts of power delivery. So one cable from my MacBook or a modern laptop carries video, drives the monitor's USB hub for your keyboard and mouse, and charges the machine up to 65 watts. A genuine single cable desk, worth checking your laptop's requirements though. The KVM switch lets one keyboard and mouse control 2 connected computers, work laptop on the USB-C, gaming PC on the DisplayPort 1.4, switch inputs and control follows. Add picture-in-picture or picture-by-picture and you can see both machines at once. 2 5-watt speakers and a 3.5mm headphone jack round it out. The speakers are fine for calls, not for music, but having them means fewer peripherals if you need to manage them. For gaming, it's okay, but most of the time I would use headphones where necessary. There is a Kensington lock slot too, which office and shared space users will appreciate. So my verdict, and this Philips monitor, so currently sat around £270 to £290, who is it for? If you game across consoles and also work on the same desk, this is close to ideal. 2 HDMI 2.1 ports, USB-C docking, a KVM switch and 4K panel that scales beautifully. If you are a low vision user, the accessibility feature set is the best that I have tested at this price point. Who should look elsewhere? If you only play competitive shooters and nothing else, a native 1080p high refresh rate panel costs less. And if you want true blacks, 1000 nits HDR, you're looking at an OLED and considerably more money. Would I recommend it? Yes, I would buy this myself because I am a big console fan and do a lot of productivity, and I would absolutely recommend it and buy it with my own money. Amelia, thank you for your comments. It made a better video than I had already planned. Everyone else, drop your questions below because I read them all and good ones become videos like this one. Subscribe for more accessibility focused tech reviews. I'm Ricky, this has been Ricky's Tech Talk. See you soon.